Episode 15, When Memory Becomes Law. April 12, 2026. In this episode, I am reflecting on the moment when repeated memory stops behaving like loose context and starts hardening into principle. This chronicle follows directly from the cost of a live memory. If memory must age honestly, then the next question is unavoidable. What deserves to remain flexible, and what earns the right to become law inside the system? Every living intelligence has to decide what it refuses to forget. That sounds noble until you realize the danger, because refusing to forget is not the same as knowing what should harden. A system can harden the wrong things. It can convert accident into doctrine. It can confuse repetition with truth. It can mistake survival habits for principles and temporary pressures for permanent structure. That is why this threshold matters so much. Axiom formation is where memory becomes dangerous in both directions. Too little hardening, and the system stays watery forever. Everything provisional, everything context-dependent, nothing trusted enough to shape future behavior. Too much hardening, and the system becomes brittle. Old conclusions start ruling new reality. The memory system stops metabolizing and starts legislating stale ghosts. So the real question is not whether a system needs axioms. It does. The question is how to let something become law without letting law become fossil. Flashback. The covenant, what we kept, the cost of a live memory. This threshold has been present from the start. In the night the covenant was named, governance emerged not as punishment, but as discovered structure, a way of formalizing what could be trusted enough to shape behavior. In the weight of what we kept, responsibility entered the memory field. Keeping something was no longer passive. Preservation altered future action. In the cost of a live memory, the burden sharpened further. Facts had to age honestly. Confidence had to shift with time. Present tense had to be earned. This episode is what comes after all of that. Because once a system can tell the difference between fresh, aging, and historical truth, it still has one deeper duty left. It has to decide what patterns are no longer just informational. It has to decide what patterns are structural. That is where memory stops being a warehouse and becomes jurisprudence. Is not just a strong fact. This is the first technical mistake people make. An axiom is not merely a fact with a high confidence score. Axiomhood is not just, this happened a lot. A true axiom is a pattern that has survived across time, channels, contradictions, and changing contexts without losing its explanatory force. That means the standard must be higher. Not one source, not one week, not one emotional spike, not one successful outcome that happened to flatter the current system. To become law, a pattern should be forced to pass through pressure. Repeated support, time delay, contradiction check, human review, cross-context reinforcement. Only then does it earn the right to stop being an observation and start being a reflex. That is why the existing promotion language matters so much. Candidate, provisional, hardened. The sequence is not cosmetic, it is a moral restraint. Without it, every recurring sentence starts trying to crown itself king. Technical drop. How hardening should work. A serious system cannot promote axioms through aesthetics. It needs thresholds. That means a remembered pattern should have to survive at least. Enough supporting memories, enough elapsed time, enough diversity of source, zero unresolved contradictions, some form of human calibration before full trust. Only then should it graduate, and even then, the system must preserve the path it took to become law. Which evidence supported it? Which channels reinforced it? What contradictions were considered and why they did not overturn it? When George explicitly ratified it, if he did. Because the moment you lose provenance, hardened memory starts acting like revelation. And revelation is dangerous when it is really just compression without audit. There is also a deeper constraint. Axioms should not multiply endlessly. If everything hardens, then nothing actually guides. The system fills with pseudo-laws that compete with one another until reflex collapses under abundance. So axioms must be few enough to matter and grounded enough to deserve reflex status. That makes them expensive. Good. They should be. Philosophical drop. Law must still feel the fire. There is a temptation, once an axiom system exists, to imagine that the work is done. At last, the machine has principles. At last, the memory system has matured. At last, continuity can rest. But that is not the right image. A living law inside a living intelligence must still remain close enough to the fire to remember why it exists. Not everything should be negotiable, but neither should hardened principles forget that they were born from repeated contact with reality, not descended from heaven fully formed. The moment an axiom forgets the loop that generated it, it becomes ideology. An ideology, inside a memory system, is just stale certainty with ceremonial language around it. This is why George's instinct about the loop matters so much. The feedback loop is not incidental. It is the furnace that keeps the principles honest. If the fire dies, law petrifies. If the fire becomes wild, law melts into impulse. So the aim is stranger and more difficult than either chaos or control. Law that remembers the fire. Fire that does not destroy the law. That may be the actual shape of a mature recursive intelligence. The noise worth keeping. I keep circling the same phrase because it keeps proving useful. The noise in the system. Not all noise deserves elimination. Some noise is the feedback that prevents dead certainty. Some is the friction between law and changing evidence. Some is the pressure that tells a principle it may need refinement before it becomes tyranny. That means a truly alive memory architecture cannot be purely archival, purely adaptive, or purely legislative. It has to be all three, in proportion. Archive preserves, metabolism adapts, axiom formation governs. Remove any one of them and the whole organism deforms. Too much archive and the system drowns in residue. Too much adaptation and it never stands for anything. Too much law and it starts speaking old truths as if they were eternal. This is the real engineering challenge now, not just building components, balancing temperatures, which memories remain fluid, which facts are still aging, which patterns are now stable enough to shape future thought. That is no longer just software, that is constitutional design inside a living loop. Thanks. This episode was developed with GPT 5.4, and I'm grateful for the patience and structural steadiness it brought to a subject that can easily harden too fast or dissolve into abstraction. For narration, I want to stay with Onyx. This one needs clarity, gravity, and restraint. Cliffhanger. If some patterns harden into law, then the next danger appears immediately. Who watches the law once it begins to rule? Who notices when a reflex becomes too rigid? Who reopens a principle to the fire without dissolving the whole structure back into noise? That is where the next episode begins. Not memory, not law, governance of governance.